Do you think your Monday started badly? Do you feel like your job is hard, repetitive, or unfair? Do you wonder why you have to get up every morning to fulfill a routine you don't always understand? What if the problem wasn't your job, but the constant comparison with an ideal notion of work? Throughout history, there have been jobs so strange, so uncomfortable, and so hard to imagine that they make any modern workday seem like a privilege. But there is something even more unsettling. Some of these jobs were not only absurd, they also supported entire systems of discipline and power. Stay with me, because by the time we reach number one, it will all make a different kind of sense. Long before mobile phones invaded our bedside tables, and before alarm clocks became a daily object, waking up on time didn't depend on a machine, it depended on another person. In the early years of industrialization, when factories set the pace of daily life, being late wasn't a minor annoyance. It was a serious problem that could cost one's salary or even one's job. From this need arose a job as simple as it was strange: the human alarm clock. These people, known as knocker-ups, walked the streets when most of the city was still asleep. They went out before dawn, walking through silent neighborhoods with the morning cold accompanying every step. Their mission was clear: to ensure that their clients woke up at the exact time. Armed with long wooden or bamboo poles, they would stop in front of windows and tap the glass carefully but insistently. It wasn't enough to make noise just once. The human alarm clock wouldn't leave until they were completely sure that the person on the other side had woken up. They had to see movement, a shadow, an unmistakable sign that the job was done. The main objective was to ensure that factory workers, bakers, and other essential workers arrived on time for their shifts. In an era without automatic alarms, this service was fundamental for the city's functioning. For those who were particularly heavy sleepers, the method became more creative. Some human alarm clocks would shoot dried peas at the windows, one after another, until they provoked a visible reaction inside the room. The most ironic thing about this job is that those who dedicated themselves to waking others also needed to get up very early. And to avoid failing, some hired another human alarm clock to wake them up first. A perfectly absurd but completely functional chain of dependency. An early example of how even the strangest jobs could sustain rigid and demanding work routines. Being a prince in medieval Europe was, ostensibly, a life of absolute privilege. Wealth, power, protection, and a position no one dared to question. However, even heirs to the throne needed discipline. The problem was that royal dignity prevented a prince from receiving physical punishment. Striking the future king was unthinkable, but the need for punishment still existed. The solution was as cruel as it was absurd. Instead of punishing the prince, another child was punished in his place. Thus was born the figure of the whipping boy. He was generally a child of the same age as the prince, educated alongside him and constantly at his side. Every time the prince misbehaved, the punishment didn't fall on the one who committed the offense, but on this substitute. The official explanation behind this practice was that the prince, upon seeing a close friend suffer, would feel guilt and learn his lesson. It was supposed that the pain of others would function as a moral corrective. In reality, as is easy to imagine, this system rarely achieved its goal. The prince observed the punishment without experiencing real consequences, while the whipping boy bore all the suffering. Even so, this role existed for generations. The whipping boy had a stable function within the court. His presence wasn't a mistake or an exception, but part of a system designed to protect the image of power. Everything was oriented toward preserving royal authority, even if it meant transferring the pain to someone weaker. This job brutally reflects how power structures can justify any sacrifice, as long as the central figure remains intact. The punishment didn't disappear. It only changed its recipient. For centuries, medicine firmly believed that many illnesses could be cured by extracting blood from the human body. Bloodletting was a common, accepted, and respected treatment. In that context, leeches weren't just repulsive animals, but valuable medical tools. Their demand was so high that it gave rise to a specific profession: the leech gatherer. These workers headed to marshes, rivers, and stagnant water areas, often in extreme conditions. They didn't use nets or elaborate instruments. Their own body was the means of work. They entered the water with bare legs and remained still for long periods, waiting for the leeches to attach to their skin. Once they had enough, they removed them one by one and stored them to sell to doctors and apothecaries. It was a slow, uncomfortable, and painful activity. The water was usually cold, which numbed the body and weakened defenses. The bites caused frequent infections, and the wounds took a long time to close. Over time, the gatherer's body was marked by permanent scars. It was a job without prestige, recognition, or glory. However, it supported a medical practice considered essential in its time. The physical suffering of the gatherer was the price others were willing to pay to be cured. This trade shows to what extent economic necessity could push a person to turn their own body into a tool of work, accepting pain as part of the daily routine. In the Chinese imperial court, there existed a job that took obedience and immobility to an extreme level. Some people were employed as human pieces in chess matches organized for the emperor. It wasn't a symbolic game or a light performance. It was a real staging, with real people occupying the place of the pieces, dressed in heavy, ornate clothing that was difficult to endure for long hours. These workers had to remain completely motionless. They couldn't speak, they couldn't sit, and they couldn't react to fatigue or pain. Their only function was to wait. The emperor reflected on every move, and during that time the human pieces remained standing, enduring the slow passage of hours. When a piece was captured, the person had to play their part to the end. They fell to the ground, feigned a dramatic death, and remained motionless while the match continued. What might seem simple quickly turned into a physical and mental test. The numbness, the pressure of the clothing, and the impossibility of moving transformed these people into mere decorative objects. They were part of the show, not participants with their own will. This job reflects an extreme vision of power, where even the human body could become just another element of entertainment, always subordinate to the will of a single person. During the 18th and 19th centuries, medical schools faced a problem that directly threatened the advancement of scientific knowledge. To study the human body and train new surgeons, they needed cadavers. However, the law only allowed the use of a very limited number of bodies, generally those of executed criminals. Demand was huge and supply was minimal. In response to this situation, a figure appeared as necessary as they were disturbing: the body snatcher. These people worked in the shadows, acting almost always at night. They infiltrated recent cemeteries, located freshly dug graves, and exhumed the bodies quickly. The goal was not to steal valuables, but the body itself. Once extracted, the cadaver was sold to medical schools and anatomists. It was an illegal but very profitable business. The risk was high, but the economic reward compensated for the danger. Over time, some body snatchers became so efficient that they began to see the digging process as an unnecessary nuisance. In certain extreme cases, they decided to eliminate that step. Instead of exhuming bodies, they created their own supply. That meant murder. Cases like Burke and Hare showed how far this trade could go when the boundary between necessity and morality completely disappeared. What is most disturbing is that many surgeons and medical professors chose to look the other way. They justified the origin of the bodies as a necessary evil for scientific progress. Knowledge advanced, but it did so on a deeply dark foundation. The body snatcher represents one of the clearest examples of how science and horror can cross paths when demand exceeds any ethical limit. Today, funerals are usually somber ceremonies, marked by silence and respect. However, throughout much of history, a funeral wasn't just a farewell, but a carefully constructed social spectacle. The intensity of the grief shown was a way to measure the importance of the deceased. To ensure this emotional impact, many families hired professional mourners. These people didn't attend the funeral because of a personal bond, but as a job. Their function was to cry, scream, and express an exaggerated grief that filled the space with emotion. The mourners knew exactly how to behave. They could sob convincingly, throw themselves to the ground, beat their chests, and tear their clothes to increase the drama. The more intense the performance, the greater the impression conveyed to the attendees. In some cultures, there were even payment systems based on the quality of the weeping. The volume of the screams, the quantity of tears, and the physical endurance to maintain the performance for long periods were valued. The most experienced mourners were in high demand, and could work from a funeral to funeral without rest. This trade demonstrates how grief, even that of others, could become a professional tool. Suffering was transformed into a public performance, and emotion became a hired service. This is without a doubt the strangest and most surprising job of all. In the English court, one of the most important positions didn't involve war, politics, or diplomacy. Its main function was to assist the king in the most intimate moment of his daily routine, going to the bathroom. The groom of the stool not only physically assisted the monarch, he was also in charge of cleaning, recording, and overseeing the king's most private habits. He had access to information no one else possessed and knew details that were out of reach for most of the court. What makes this job truly shocking is that it wasn't a humiliating or marginal position. Quite the opposite. It was one of the positions closest to the king. That proximity generated trust, and trust translated into influence. The groom of the stool heard private conversations, knew moods, and was present in moments when no minister had access. Over time, many of these aides accumulated considerable political power, influencing important decisions of the kingdom. This job demonstrates an uncomfortable truth about power. It doesn't always reside in the most visible roles. Sometimes the most intimate access is the most effective form of influence. History is full of jobs that today we find hard to believe. People who woke others with strikes of a pole, children who suffered punishments for others' mistakes, bodies used as medical tools, and men who built power from the most unexpected places. All of this existed and was part of the normal functioning of society. So next time you feel that your work is heavy or unfair, remember that there were times when work-related sacrifice meant physical pain, humiliation, or constant danger. History is strange, and compared to it, your workday probably isn't so bad.